A woman with terrifying psychological manipulation skills turned her closest friends into puppets. Lies so unbelievable, yet powerful enough to completely blind three women. They sacrificed everything: money, conscience, and even the lives of those they loved most. How can one person completely control another's mind? How thin is the line between manipulation and brainwashing? Today, we'll explore one of the most chilling cases of mental control in Japanese history, the story of Junko Yoshida. In 1959, Junko was born into a poor family in Yanagawa City, Fukuoka Prefecture. She had a younger brother, and her father was a former soldier who now worked as a mechanic earning a meager salary. To make ends meet, her mother was forced to take on additional work, but despite both parents' hard efforts, the family remained trapped in poverty. What made matters worse was the mother's deeply ingrained preference for sons over daughters. She spoiled her son blindly while treating Junko harshly, constantly showing dissatisfaction with her daughter. To escape the constant scolding, Junko gradually learned to fabricate stories about small matters. This habit grew over the years, and by her teens, she had become a pathological liar, someone who could naturally and convincingly make up any story. In 1975, Junko enrolled in healthcare studies at Saga Private Girls' School. During her junior year, she told her classmates that a friend of hers had accidentally gotten pregnant. Since she was still a minor, she could only get an abortion, but didn't dare ask her parents for money, so she wanted everyone to lend her some money. Although this story had no evidence, it sounded reasonable. Combined with Junko's tearful pleas, many classmates opened their hearts to help, extending a helping hand to this unfortunate friend. She quickly swindled hundreds of thousands of yen. Eventually, the scheme was discovered, Junko was expelled from school, and she failed to obtain her nursing certificate. A year later, at age 19, she transferred to Santa Maria Nursing College. There, she met Miyuki Tsutsumi, Hitomi Ishii, and Kazuko Ikegami. Miyuki had been her elementary and middle school classmate, but only as an acquaintance. Hitomi and Kazuko were completely new faces in her life. After graduation, all four girls started new lives. Junko maintained contact with them, but their meetings gradually became less frequent. Then one day, Junko seemed to vanish from everyone's lives. For over a decade, she only occasionally sent brief greetings by phone, leaving no one knowing where she was or what she was doing. It wasn't until 1992, when she had turned 31, that Junko suddenly reappeared like a ghost from the past. She showed up at the hospital where Miyuki worked and was quickly hired as a part-time nurse. Fate once again brought the two old friends together as colleagues, exactly 11 years after leaving Santa Maria. So what had Junko experienced during those 11 missing years? In 1981, shortly after graduation, she entered into marriage with Koji Yoshida, a self-defense force officer in Kurume. However, this wasn't a union born of love, but a calculated alliance. Both had their eyes on Koji's grandmother's enormous fortune, patiently waiting for the right opportunity. Finally, in 1990, when the grandmother passed away, the couple successfully inherited a valuable piece of land. Junko wasted no time convincing her husband to convert this property into 30 million yen, approximately $270,000, in cash through a bank loan. But easy money is easily spent. Within just 2 years, the entire sum had vanished into reckless spending. When their finances were depleted, Junko was forced to return to nursing, which brought her back into Miyuki's life. By this time, Junko's marriage had become an empty shell. The couple's relationship had grown cold, but she was pregnant. Miyuki, with her compassionate heart, accompanied Junko through this difficult decision and cared for her during these challenging months. After working together for several months, the friendship between the two quickly deepened. Miyuki gradually opened up about her private life. She was having a complicated relationship with a bar owner. Everything seemed sweet until Miyuki discovered she was pregnant, and worse, the man was already married. She was determined to end the illicit relationship, but the man wouldn't let go, continuously harassing and threatening her. In desperation, Miyuki turned to Junko for comfort. She didn't expect much, just someone to listen and share the burden in her heart. But Junko's reaction was completely unexpected. She confidently promised, "Let me handle it. I'll solve this for you." Then she began telling about a mysterious, powerful figure, someone with deep connections to the royal family, authority over law enforcement agencies, and who could even influence the fate of Japan itself. The story sounded so outrageous that even children would find it hard to believe. But Miyuki, in a state of exhaustion and desperation, applied the principle of, if it works, great. If not, no harm done. She asked no questions, wasn't curious about this mysterious person's identity, and simply believed there might be some miracle. Of course, this powerful person existed only in Junko's imagination. After the colorful promises, she did absolutely nothing. But coincidentally, the harassing man actually did disappear from Miyuki's life. Perhaps he had gotten tired, perhaps he had found a new target, but whatever the reason, this coincidence created a powerful psychological effect. In Miyuki's eyes, Junko had become a woman with miraculous abilities, just as Junko had described. This was the moment Junko realized the gold mine that fate had brought her. A bold idea formed in her mind. Why not turn Miyuki into a long-term financial source? She would gradually take complete control of this naive friend's life, turning her into an obedient puppet. The plan began with a threatening warning. Junko sternly announced that the powerful person was extremely displeased with Miyuki's ungrateful attitude. To receive such great help without showing any gratitude, this was an unforgivable insult. The consequences would be terrible. He had ordered a gang to kidnap Miyuki and sell her to Southeast Asia as a memorable lesson. With the foundation of trust from the bar owner incident, Miyuki had completely idolized the mysterious, powerful person. When she heard the threat, she was terrified and begged Junko to find a way to save her. This was exactly the reaction Junko expected. Junko quickly reassured her, once again affirming her special relationship with the mysterious person and promising to intervene. However, to ensure absolute safety, Miyuki should temporarily move in with her. "It's just a precautionary measure," Junko explained. "Once everything calms down, you can go home." Miyuki, in a state of panic and desperation, agreed without much thought. Exactly as Junko had calculated, from now on she could control every aspect of the victim's life. But Junko didn't stop there. To tighten control, she decided to take the relationship to a new level. One evening, she suddenly confessed to Miyuki, revealing that she had secretly loved her for a long time and hoped they could become a real couple. Miyuki was shocked by this sudden confession. She had only ever been interested in men and had no romantic inclinations toward women. But Junko cleverly turned this into a protection strategy. "If you're my girlfriend, the powerful person will have to respect me and won't dare do anything to you." In confusion and under pressure, Miyuki finally nodded in agreement. From then on, they officially became lovers. From that point forward, Miyuki gradually fell under Junko's complete control, losing all sense of self. She handed over her entire salary and credit cards to Junko. No matter how unreasonable Junko's words were, she always obeyed. During this period, Junko not only consumed Miyuki's entire income, but also used her credit cards to withdraw about 1.5 million yen, approximately $13,500, in cash. Later, Junko began giving Miyuki sleeping pills, keeping her in a drowsy state day after day, making her completely into a puppet under her control. In June 1994, tragedy struck. Due to the effects of sleeping pills, Miyuki had a serious car accident. The severe impact left her in a coma for several days. Instead of worrying like a normal lover would, Junko saw this as a golden opportunity to deliver the final blow. As soon as Miyuki woke up, with her mind still foggy and memories scrambled, Junko sternly announced the terrible news. In the accident, Miyuki had killed an innocent person. The victim's family was demanding enormous compensation, and if she couldn't pay, Miyuki would have to spend her life in prison. "But fortunately, you have me," Junko comforted with a caring expression. "I'll ask the powerful person to intervene to arrange everything, but it will cost a significant amount of money." The truth was that the accident had only damaged Miyuki's car with no injuries. But in her weakened state after the head trauma, with faded memories, Miyuki completely believed Junko's words. When she learned she had given all her assets to her lover, she desperately called home to ask her mother to lend her 5.5 million yen, approximately $50,000. This final sum officially sealed Junko's complete conquest of Miyuki. From an independent woman, Miyuki was now just a living ghost in the fantasy world Junko had created. When Miyuki had become the perfect puppet, Junko began looking further ahead. The financial source from one person would soon be exhausted. She needed to expand her business operations. The next target on her list was Hitomi. Hitomi was married with 3 children and had always maintained a good relationship with Junko through calls and greetings. Junko herself had introduced Hitomi to her husband. This husband not only had a habit of infidelity, but was also involved in enormous debts. To salvage the situation, Hitomi and her husband had to sell their house, obtaining 10 million yen, approximately $90,000, to pay off debts. This was exactly when Junko decided to act. She instructed Miyuki to call Hitomi, pretending to be a kind person wanting to help. This mysterious woman suggested that Hitomi should find a debt counseling expert to negotiate with creditors, potentially reducing interest rates and creating more favorable payment conditions. The plan proceeded smoothly to a frightening degree. Hitomi, worried about her family's financial situation, immediately thought of Junko, the friend who always seemed knowledgeable and trustworthy. When Junko reluctantly agreed to take on the mediator role, Hitomi didn't hesitate to transfer the entire amount from the house sale to her, trusting that her close friend would help solve all problems. Hitomi's family transferred a total of 7.5 million yen, approximately $67,500, to Junko. This money naturally ended up in Junko's pocket. Throughout this process, Hitomi not only didn't suspect Junko's words, but continuously thanked her, believing she had helped solve a major problem. From then on, Hitomi also became one of Junko's devotees. Besides Hitomi and Miyuki, Junko had another close friend with even longer tenure, Kazuko. Around 1990, when Kazuko's family moved to a neighborhood near her home, Junko immediately recognized the potential opportunity. Kazuko was the perfect type to become a victim. Introverted personality, lonely, and lacking friends. Unlike her usual reserved character, Kazuko only opened up and became talkative when with Junko. She shared every hidden corner of her life, from small worries to family secrets, considering Junko her only and most trustworthy confidant. However, behind Junko's friendly smile was absolute coldness. She not only disliked Kazuko, but secretly despised this naive friend. To Junko, friendship was just a tool. Relationships only had value when they brought financial benefits. Kazuko was no different from a fat fish she kept in a tank, waiting for harvest day. And that day finally came. Junko decided to exploit an old wound from Kazuko's past. From their time working together at the hospital, she knew that Kazuko had once had serious conflicts with a colleague named Kairi. At that time, Kazuko had abused her authority to continuously harass and oppress Kairi, creating a toxic work environment. Eventually, Kairi couldn't endure it anymore and had to quit her job and leave the city. Junko cleverly exploited this incident. She told Kazuko that after Kairi moved elsewhere, her work wasn't going well, and she could only find a man to marry. As a result, her husband abused her, and she gave birth to a child with congenital disabilities. Now the widowed mother and child had a very difficult life. Junko's logic was, since Kazuko had bullied this person in the past, leading to her current situation, the source of this person's misfortune was actually Kazuko's fault. She should compensate this person as atonement for her sins. Conveniently, Junko could serve as a mediator to help arrange things, so Kazuko should give this money to Junko. To perfect the fraud script, Junko recruited Hitomi into the scheme. She had Hitomi play the role of Kairi's representative, creating tense negotiations over the phone right in front of Kazuko. Although this story had logical holes that were hard to conceal, Kazuko, who had been brainwashed through years of friendship, swallowed everything. She completely believed she was truly guilty toward Kairi and needed to compensate. Eventually, Kazuko had to borrow 11 million yen, approximately $99,000, from her father and handed it all over to Junko. With this, Junko's trio of devotees was complete. 3 women from different corners of life, each with their own weaknesses, had all fallen into the web of love and money that Junko had woven. In the following years, Junko continued to systematically exploit these resources. She made up countless reasons to demand money, from service fees for the powerful person to various profitable investments totaling over 50 million yen, approximately $450,000, swindled from the 3 victims. With this money, she bought a luxurious duplex apartment in Kurume and enjoyed an extravagant lifestyle. But by 1998, this gold mine was nearly exhausted. The 3 women had given up almost everything they had. Junko needed a new plan, another source of income to maintain her wasteful lifestyle. And soon after, she found a way, a more terrifying and cruel method than anything before. Kazuko's husband was named Hirata Eiji, a good man who loved his wife. After marriage, he was very caring and attentive to his wife. But at the same time, this husband was very attractive to women. Kazuko, already introverted by nature, constantly worried that her husband would have an affair. So one day, she turned to her good friend Junko for advice. This news made Junko's eyes light up. She quickly thought of a plan to kill Kazuko's husband, creating an accident to defraud insurance money. Before this, although Junko's money-extorting methods were inhumane, at least her hands weren't stained with blood. From this incident onward, she had broken the final boundary. However, Junko herself probably felt no psychological burden. She was inherently shameless. As long as she could make money and maintain her luxurious lifestyle, nothing else mattered. So Junko first friendly indicated she would investigate Kazuko's husband through important connections. A few days later, she pretended to tell her that after investigation, her husband was indeed having an affair. When Kazuko accepted that her husband had a mistress, Junko pretended to help her analyze. If left unchecked, her husband would spend all their money on his mistress, and then she and the children wouldn't get a penny. So the best way was to kill him, then disguise it as a traffic accident, so she could receive a large insurance payout. Kazuko initially hesitated. At least her husband had always treated her well. So to encourage Kazuko, Junko first planted a bottle of sleeping pills in his car, then pretended to accidentally discover it. The implication was that her husband had planned to use sleeping pills to kill her, so now if she wanted to live, she could only strike first. From then on, Kazuko was completely bewitched. She firmly believed that only by killing her husband could she solve the problem. So Junko brought Miyuki into the plan, and the 3 began plotting murder together. The initial plan was to cause Hirata to die of heart failure from potassium poisoning. But whether the dosage wasn't enough or for some other reason, a month later, Hirata was still perfectly fine. Reluctantly, the 3 changed the plan to first giving him sleeping pills, then directly injecting potassium into his body while he slept. On the evening of January 21st, 1998, the 3 followed their plan and gave Kazuko's husband sleeping pills, and he quickly fell asleep. Ridiculously, the action got stuck at the injection stage. 3 professional nurses tried several times without success. That day's murder plan was declared a failure. The next day, the 3 tried to kill again. This time, Junko suggested that to ensure success, they should directly pump air into Hirata's bloodstream. This poor man was injected with large amounts of air in 15 separate injections, dying in his sleep. After Hirata was killed, the 3 took his body to the hospital. Since death was caused by air injection into the bloodstream, the hospital's autopsy found no abnormalities, ultimately concluding that this murder was death by accident. Her husband's death helped Kazuko receive 35 million yen, approximately $315,000, in compensation, plus condolence money, pension, support from relatives, etc. All this money eventually went into Junko's pocket. According to later statistics, in this incident, Junko had stolen a total of 110 million yen, approximately $990,000, from Kazuko. Junko regretted not discovering this profitable path sooner. Such high-profit work naturally had to be done several more times. But Junko and her husband had long had only a formal marriage. Miyuki had also divorced her husband long ago. Among her devotees, only Hitomi had a husband. Junko chose her as the target. Previously, Junko had swindled 7.5 million yen from Hitomi, and not long after, Hitomi's family had moved to live in Okawa City. The relationship between the two didn't continue to develop further. This was also why Hitomi didn't participate in the previous murder plan. To re-establish contact, Junko sent New Year's greetings to Hitomi in 1999. She then called many times to check in. Thus, the relationship between the two became close again. By the end of February, Junko traveled from afar to Okawa City to visit Hitomi's home. Just as the two were chatting, Hitomi received a strange phone call. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Kogure Tamayuki, and she told Hitomi, "Your husband has several mistresses and is also committing fraud outside, destroying other families." This was clearly Junko's familiar tactic. Kogure Tamayuki on the phone was actually Kazuko. Junko deliberately arranged for Hitomi to receive this call while she was visiting Hitomi's home, precisely to conveniently brainwash her during this initial period. Receiving this call, Hitomi was somewhat confused. So at this moment, Junko could step forward. She again took the initiative to assume the role of negotiation expert, engaging in a fierce war of words with Kogure Tamayuki on the other end of the line. After hanging up, she seriously told Hitomi, "The person your husband swindled has committed suicide, and their family is very angry, planning to take revenge on your entire family." Hitomi was terrified and immediately asked Junko what she should do. This question was exactly what Junko wanted. She replied, "Your husband no longer deserves to live. You might as well kill him. That way, the other party can't take action against your family either." Hearing these words, Hitomi momentarily found it hard to accept. But her husband indeed had serious debt problems, and she already lacked trust in him. So under Junko's continuous encouragement, she came to trust Junko. Junko also knew her control over Hitomi wasn't strong enough. To guide Hitomi further, she forced her to write a commitment stating she must kill her husband. With the plan meticulously laid out, they decided to exploit the target's biggest weakness, severe alcohol addiction. The death would be disguised as a tragic but unsuspicious alcohol poisoning. On March 27th, Hitomi performed her role perfectly. She called her estranged husband, using the excuse of needing to discuss the children's future to lure him home. Dinner was carefully prepared with his favorite curry, which had been mixed with enough sleeping pills to fell an elephant. Within minutes, the man had fallen into a sleep from which he would never wake. When the clock struck 10 p.m., Junko, Miyuki, and Kazuko carefully inserted a tube through the victim's nose, slowly pumping alcohol into his stomach. To ensure effectiveness, they didn't hesitate to pour an entire bottle of whiskey directly into the tube. The perfect play succeeded once again. The medical examiner didn't suspect anything when seeing an alcoholic die from overdose. This was a natural death in their eyes. The death certificate clearly stated, "Death by accident." Hitomi received an insurance payout of 32 million yen, approximately $290,000. And almost all of it flowed into Junko's pocket under the guise of service fees and gratitude money for the powerful person. Hitomi even had to dig up an additional 30 million yen, approximately $270,000, from her husband's pension fund to thank Junko for helping her escape the unhappy marriage. By this point, Junko had madly earned over 200 million yen, approximately $1.8 million, through deceiving and controlling her three friends. She then used the money to buy a duplex apartment, living together with her three devotees. She moved into the most luxurious room on the second floor of the apartment, while the other three lived downstairs, successfully controlling three people to carry out two murders, not only avoiding suspicion but also obtaining large sums of money. Junko became increasingly arrogant. She declared that she was now valued by the important person and had been promoted to be the important person's spokesperson. At the same time, she ordered Miyuki and the others to use honorific language with her, addressing her as Yoshida-sama. She pushed all daily work onto the three devotees. At this point, Junko had become a high-class queen, arbitrarily ruling over the three. For ordinary people, 200 million yen would be enough to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. But Yoshida-sama couldn't be satisfied. As time passed, the money was quickly spent again. Watching the numbers in her bank account grow smaller, she began frequently demanding money from the three devotees. But who to demand from? Miyuki and Kazuko had obviously been drained dry long ago. Looking around, only Hitomi might still have some resources left. So she told Hitomi, "Last time we killed your husband, thanks to the important person's help, we weren't suspected by the police. You should take another 40 million yen, approximately $360,000, for me to give to the important person as a thank you fee." Hitomi found this request unreasonable. Killing her husband and getting insurance money had only netted about 30 million yen. And after her husband died, she had already handed over all her assets. Where could she find another 40 million? Junko also discovered that Hitomi truly couldn't come up with the money, so she let this matter go. But the money earned previously was almost spent, so she had to think of other ways to make more. She quickly set her sights on a new prey, Miyuki's 82-year-old mother. Miyuki's mother had diabetes and was being treated with insulin at the time. As a nurse, Junko knew very well that simply giving this patient hypoglycemic drugs would directly lead to death. The initial plan was for Miyuki to do it herself. As a daughter, she would be most convenient and wouldn't arouse suspicion. But facing her seriously ill mother, Miyuki hesitated and couldn't bring herself to act. Junko could only come up with a second assassination plan. She ordered Hitomi to disguise herself as a private detective and carry out the killing instead of Miyuki. At this point, Hitomi had quietly begun to have some doubts. Previously, when Junko forced her to kill her husband, she could still provide some reasons, however absurd they might be. At least logically, they could barely make sense. The problem was, this time, what reason did Junko have to kill Miyuki's mother? This question left Junko flustered. No matter how clever her tongue, she truly couldn't think of a reasonable explanation. She could only crudely answer, "Just help me do this well, and the 40 million thank you fee to the important person will be waived for you." So, on May 29th, 2000, Hitomi, with doubts in her heart, disguised herself as a private detective and went to Miyuki's mother's residence. Using the excuse of wanting to learn about your daughter, she successfully tricked her way inside. Once inside, Hitomi pretended to take out a pile of forged documents. While the old lady was looking down at the documents, she suddenly pulled out a syringe full of hypoglycemic drugs and stabbed toward the old lady's neck. Unexpectedly, Miyuki's mother reacted very quickly. As soon as she felt pain, she realized the danger. She immediately dodged the needle and stood up to struggle with Hitomi. Seeing the situation wasn't working, Hitomi panicked and fled the scene. 2 attempts at murder had both failed. Junko was furious and turned her attention to the land under Hitomi's father's name. She fiercely told Hitomi, "Anyway, the money the important person demands must be paid. Now we can only think of a way to take your father's land and use the money from selling it to pay the 40 million yen." Hearing these words, Hitomi immediately felt she was being pushed into a corner. Hitomi was actually special among Junko's 3 devotees. She was the last to join the small group, had the least previous interaction with Junko, and had never lived with her for long periods. Therefore, she wasn't completely brainwashed by Junko and still retained some ability for independent judgment. Junko seemed to understand that her control over Hitomi wasn't as strong as over the other 2. To prevent Hitomi from being awakened by her family, she forced Hitomi to write a letter cutting ties with her family, trying to make her completely sever family connections and totally submit to her. Not completing the task Junko assigned, being forced to steal her father's land, and now being ordered to cut ties with her family, Hitomi fell into deep anxiety. Though she had been brainwashed for a long time and didn't have the courage to oppose Yoshida-sama, her heart was full of doubts. Why did Yoshida-sama force them to harm their own relatives? Why did she always use various reasons to demand money from them? And most importantly, Why did she have to unconditionally obey her? Not knowing where else to turn, Hitomi finally chose to seek advice from others. She told her uncle about the doubts and suspicions in her heart. Hitomi's family had long found Junko very problematic, but seeing Hitomi's close relationship with her, they hadn't said anything. This time, when Hitomi told her family everything, it exploded like a bomb. With her family's persuasion and help, she began to gradually reclaim the self she had abandoned. On August 2, 2001, with her family's support, Hitomi went to the Kurume police station and confessed. Although Hitomi concealed her role in killing her husband to avoid charges, faced with such serious criminal circumstances, the police immediately arrested Junko, Miyuki, and Kazuko one by one. Junko had never imagined she would lose control of these three devotees. When she saw Hitomi beginning to reveal the truth about their crimes, she was so shocked she couldn't speak. Under police persuasion, Miyuki and Kazuko finally awakened and gradually began to confess everything that had happened over the past 10 years. This terrifying case of manipulation and serial murder was finally brought to light. In September 2004, the first trial of the case was held at the Kurume District Court. Although Junko denied everything, the police had reconstructed the entire truth through the testimonies of the other three. The court found that mastermind Junko was greedy and extremely selfish. To satisfy her perverted desire for money, she disregarded human life, using deception, threats, and manipulation to control others and plan multiple murders. She showed no remorse whatsoever. She not only destroyed the lives of 3 women, but also caused the wrongful deaths of 2 men. The 3 accomplices, Miyuki, Kazuko, and Hitomi, although they committed crimes under others' manipulation, lacked judgment, couldn't distinguish right from wrong, and not only failed to stop the mastermind's criminal intent, but willingly became her accomplices. Finally, Junko was convicted of inciting murder and fraud, sentenced to death in the first trial. 2 subsequent appeals were rejected. The final appeal confirmed the death sentence in March 2010, and she was executed on March 25, 2016. Miyuki was convicted of murder and sentenced to death in the first trial. But in a later trial, considering she wasn't the mastermind and was the primary victim of Junko's mental control, the final appeal changed this to life imprisonment. Hitomi was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment in the first trial. But because she had killed the fewest people and had voluntarily confessed, the final appeal changed this to 17 years with the possibility of parole. Kazuko was discovered to have uterine cancer when arrested and died of illness in prison shortly after her arrest. This unbelievable 10-year brainwashing murder case finally came to an end. This case became a terrifying warning about the destructive power of psychological manipulation. It shows that sometimes the most dangerous enemies aren't strangers, but those we trust most. The story of Junko Yoshida will forever remind us that in this world, there are people with no conscience whatsoever, and they can turn anyone into a victim if we're not sufficiently vigilant. Thank you for following today's case. See you in the next videos.